Futility in political advancement. Did you get that? Futility in political advancement. The average U.S. congressman or congresswoman is a millionaire. The average U.S. senator is extremely wealthy, carry a net worth of maybe $10 million, or in many cases much more. Sadly, most of these leaders came into office with very little net worth at all, and they make maybe an average of a couple hundred, maybe I'll give or take $200,000, but they become 7 and 8 figure millionaires on the way out. But in the end, political advancement in the abuse of office is simply futility. The good news is that God sees all. Greetings, everybody. My name is Stephen Garofalo. This is Reason for Truth, where the truth comes first and the reasons come last, but where we're always in constantly learning, because when we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. Reason for Truth is the channel and the organization that helps you, both Christian and non-Christian, cut through the fog of culture's distorted truth, because in our relative world, the truth doesn't change, but the human will to distort it certainly does. We cut through the distortion of current events with the truth as an antidote to the false messages that are so pervasive in our world today. But also, make sure you join our community. It's StephenGarofalo.com. It's free. There's a subscriber level for a few bucks a month, but that's optional. You can go check it out. StephenGarofalo.com. You're going to get exclusive videos and posts that we do not put up on social media sites. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4, 13 to 16, Solomon makes an abrupt shift of the topic of advancement in life. And this time he's dealing with it in relation to political power. He's already covered it from other aspects of life, right? All's futility, business, enjoyment. Now he's going to deal with is futility in government, and certainly government corruption. Solomon used the story of 3 kings in these verses to illustrate that political advancement under the sun, right? Just as corporate and business success is futile, here in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, the plot line of Solomon's story is as follows. There's an old king who is a fool. Why? Because he has an unteachable spirit, and he does not listen to the advice or the warning of those who perhaps are more wise than him. Verse 13, as in turn, though, as a consequence of his unteachable spirit regarding God's wisdom, he is replaced by what? A youthful king who is far wiser. Even though he was once poor and in prison, that's the young king, like you saw in Joseph, verse 14, but even this young king's wisdom is not enough, because he too is replaced by yet another king, another youthful king, the third king, how did he get in office? Tells you the secret. Well, he wasn't poor, he wasn't in prison, he was just real good looking, charismatic. Why? He was real popular. Did something to get popular, verses 15 to 16. And this is big in American culture, and I'd say culture all over the world. The popularity of the third king, however, is only temporary. Verse 16, this leaves us scratching our heads as to the vanity of the political power, which again is limited in nature. Right? Enjoy your candy now, you're going to be puking in the morning from eating the sinful nature of abuse of power in others. This loose narrative, by the way, today indicates that people can attain power 3 ways. First, through seniority. A lot of times we've seen even senators and congressmen try to pass down their seat to their kids. What's up with that? So number 1 is through seniority. Second, through wisdom. That's a good thing. And third, by popularity. But in each case, the final result and the outcome is the same, and that the political power, it's all vanity. It's called Hebel Hebel in Hebrew is the word for, again, vanity, because it's fleeting. And in the end, popularity, even in the form of royal power, is elusive. You know, we look at the Queen of England. What a godly lady. We're going to miss her. But her reign came for a very long time, and then it went. See, all too often, as sinful people, we want a popular, charismatic leader who wants us to feel good, by their smooth speech. We somehow feel that such a charismatic, smooth speaker actually equates to or leads to political wisdom and perhaps maybe ethical leadership. I remember when Mitt Romney, for example, was running for office. Now, I have friends that are Mormons, but I don't see Mormon as Christianity, okay? And they deny most of the 66 books of the Bible. They take part of it. They have their own Bible. It's called the Mormon Bible. And they don't believe that Jesus Christ is the only Son of God. They believe there are many sons of God. So based on that, it would disqualify them as being part of the Christian faith. Now, that being said, I remember, Mitt Romney, very distinguished man, very smooth talker. When he was in office, I had friends that would rather have taken him over another president based on the fact that he just carried himself as a statesman. Now, I would say that falls under the charismatic king, right? He's very charismatic. He's very popular. That's the third king there. We got to be careful. Remember, Israel asked for a king. He was he was taller than anybody else, good looking, and very charismatic. Want a king? You want an earthly king for the wrong reasons? God may just allow it and give it to you. So how often do we find movie stars and charismatic leaders with little, if any, experience in political office? My favorite, speaking cheek and tongue here, is Al Franken. The guy was a comedian before he turned senator. How did that happen? Why? Because people voted on him because they knew who he was. He was popular in the media. So what was his qualifications? I guess he was a comedian. That was his qualification. Not that you have to have a master's in political science. I don't think that's necessary either. But being a comedian, I don't think that qualifies you to be president or senator or anything. So his positions on moral issues were very clear as unbiblical, but people voted for him anyhow, perhaps because they liked his comedy sketches or maybe they liked him personally. Then we got President Zelensky of Ukraine. Guy, again, he was a movie star before he became president. As a friend reminded me the other day, well, look at President Reagan, right? That was the first president I ever voted for. I was 18 years old. Well, he was an actor. Then he became governor before then. That was cutting edge to put a movie actor into the office, right? That became a trend then. That's how Bill Clinton got elected, because then all of a sudden people said, this is a great, governor's like the president of a state, now we can make him president of a country. What that evolved into was the fact that in the end, we begin to create a political system that all of a sudden, well, you have to be in government to go ahead and take the position or the office of president. So, listen, there's nothing wrong with a comedian or an actor becoming president. But the question is, what do they stand for? Where have they been? What's their capability to lead? I would submit that in the early days of America, almost exclusively, up until actually recent history, it was military leaders. Now, looking at Zelensky of Ukraine, he's not an American politician, but he was an actor, right? And he comes out, and what is he wearing? Military garbs. Now, I don't know what his military experience is, but from my understanding, he doesn't have military experience. So it's the optics in the media. Anyways, we find poor track records of speaking the truth and promoting immoral policies and laws with such leaders, yet people support them because some perceived legitimacy given to them by the media. Going back to the Ecclesiastes in another case, Solomon speaks about an old king that had been born to the throne, but who becomes so foolish and senile that he can't discern that his days for ruling are over. This is a big one. You can go back and read it. This is what it says. This is very reminiscent of the American politician today and our political system. Just look at the American Senate, right? And all the congressmen and congresswomen. Look at the Speaker of the House on the Democrat side, right? I mean, she's over 80 years old. You got Fauci over 80 years old. These people can't let go of their power. So look at the news, make a list of how many top leaders you see in their 80s, and the same is true on the Republican side. John McCain, I mean, that man was going out on a stretcher, and, they just can't let go. They can't let go of their privilege, their power. Why? Because life is good. When you don't have to worry about the responsibility other than using other people's stuff to make other people happy, life is good. Okay, just about every single one of our political leaders, not all, came into office with no money, power, or prestige. According to ballotpedia.org in an article entitled Net Worth of United States Senators and Representatives, the average net worth of a senator in 2011 was $7,888,000. In 2020, Wikipedia established that half of the members of Congress were millionaires as of 2021. Rick Scott of Florida, a Republican, had a net worth of $259.7 million. It's a lot of money. Mark Warner, a Democrat, had a net worth of $214.1 million. Working your way to the very bottom of the list, I guess, Lisa Blunt of Rochester, New York. She was the poorest with just a net worth of around $10.7 million. And this was based on 2018 information, and those numbers have gone up vastly. The numbers are much greater now, obviously. Lastly, Nancy Pelosi, my favorite. Newsweek, in an article entitled How Nancy Pelosi's Net Worth Vastly Increased While House Speaker by Dara Roach, on November 25, 2022 at 10:54 a.m. You can look it up, Eastern Standard Time, wrote that Pelosi's net worth was estimated to be as much as, listen, a staggering $171.4 million as of the October report. It says by the Washington Free Beacon, a conservative news outlet that arrived at that figure. That's who came up with it by taking into account the ranges of all the individual assets and liabilities in Pelosi's financial disclosure statement. That's what she disclosed. If she didn't disclose anything, there's even more there. Who knows? The Washington Free Beacon also estimated that Pelosi's net worth had risen by $140 million since 2008. That's pretty close to the time she took Speaker of the House. Now, much of this was obtained through insider trading, by the way, the wealth was, which is, of course, illegal and could carry prison time for you and I or anybody else, including business leaders. Just ask Martha Stewart, who found herself arrested and is subject to, I guess, jail and a big fine. But it's not illegal for one group of people. Who is that? Our elected representatives. Can you imagine that? So they made the law illegal for anybody else but themselves to do insider trading on the stock market. Want to know why the stock market's so hot? Because their laws are skewed to make them richer. Okay? So these elected representatives who refuse to make it illegal for them to use insider information to profit from themselves personally. As a result, almost all of our elected leaders came from no wealth into being some of the most wealthiest people in the country and in the world in many cases. Listen, at this point, many of our senior leaders are now in their 80s or approaching old age and in their last season of life. They are nearing the end of the runway, as I like to say, and yet they grasp so tightly to their wealth and their power. Yet they act like fools. They think they're going to live forever. For those who vote these politicians in, by the way, they too act like fools, and I'd submit that they have compliance regarding the end result of any politician who and I can't blame anybody for voting in a good politician who gets corrupted, but those who have a track record of what they stand for and what they believe that are immoral and anti-biblical, listen, you're going to have culpability in the actions of the leader that you cast a vote for. Again, a lot of these leaders think they're going to live forever. And even though most of them don't show any faith in God or belief in heaven, only a very distorted view of eternity. That's what they show. Perhaps they've been privileged on the backs of the average citizen for so long, they really think that their political power, affluence, influence in the world is going to somehow work for their advantage, or it's actually going to work for Almighty God of the universe. Remember, to be absent from the body is to be present of the Lord. Now, imagine that. I think a lot of these people think that when, whatever comes next, they kind of see themselves as the pharaohs, but they fail to understand that the pharaohs, we dig up their burials now, and all the stuff the pharaohs were supposed to take with them, the canoes and the gold and everything, it's still there, including the bones of the pharaohs. So let's remember the age-old wisdom found in Proverbs that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. It's Proverbs 16:18. Luke tells us in Luke 6:24, but woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Over the next few years, many of these national leaders are going to pass on into eternity. And they're going to get up there, and I think they think, well, who do I need to talk to get a better seat here? I think God's going to tell them, listen, you got your comfort. We should be praying for our leaders, by the way. We don't want to see this happen to them. But if they're not going to stop, that's called the consequence. Wealth and all that God has entrusted them to, and us as well, it's all going to come to an end, and we're going to be accountable to God. And so God will show them the full breadth of their errors, as he is going to do for us, and the suffering that we've caused to others. But them as being leaders, it doesn't span in the hundreds, it spans in the millions, and in for the entire world, nothing to mention the nation. God is also going to show them the good that they could have done, that using their influence, their affluence, their authority, and their position. But they didn't. So the Lord lent to them, listen, in his short period of life as he does you and I, the ability to carry through with his mission and do good and add value and help people, not be selfish, use it for ourselves or for other immoral means. Sadly, many, if not most of them, of these political leaders are going to conclude that they chose selfishness at the expense of others over the selflessness of giving of themselves and helping others. That's what we're supposed to be. In the United States government is all about public servants. My mom said that years ago. My dad worked for the Department of the Navy in Washington, D.C., came from Italy. My mom said, your dad was a civil servant. Now, that's a dirty word today. How dare you call me a servant? And that's what you would see, or being, a person that's under other people. Well, Jesus came, washed the feet, right, of his disciples, and he put himself last to be first. My thinking is that they better enjoy it now, the politicians, because the time is very limited. The party's coming to an end, eternal judgment. It waits right around the corner for those who reject God's ways and who abuse the power that God has lent them in this short span of time called life. We need to be praying again for our leaders, but if they fail to respond, we can rest assured that, just like according to us, that they're square in God's sights for accountability according to their motives, their thoughts, and certainly their actions. Our modern day leaders see themselves more as kings, folks, rather than servants. Sadly, they are unable to see that their days of ruling are coming to an end, so they grasp the power and the vanity of the artificial life that we live in today with all the technology. But again, rest assured, time is at hand for many of our immoral leaders to age out of life and leadership into the presence of the Almighty God for their use or misuse of all the Lord has entrusted them with. Going back to Ecclesiastes, lastly, Solomon speaks about another young man. Remember, we talked a little bit about him. This third king, he took over for the second king, right? Solomon says that he may rise from prison to take the throne, just as Joseph did in Genesis 41:14 and 37-41. The point of the third king, by the way, the story is that political advancement is futile. And it's very short. Solomon makes clear that those who come afterward, in other words, after the one king, that even the young man who replaces his predecessor will share the old king's fate. It's going to come and go. It's like vacation. We get so excited. We know we're going on this great trip, and it comes and goes. We look forward to the next one until we end up in the ground. In other words, today's hero may become tomorrow's beggar. But even if he maintains his or her power for a bit longer than expected, there lies God. At the end of the road, to demand an answer and accounting as to their use of or abuse of power, wealth, and leadership of citizens, that's key. It is God who entrusted these kings to govern the citizens. And at this point, those political leaders will finally understand that at some point in life, and that towards the end here, that this futility in political advancement. You get to the end, you've taken all the goodies, and unless you're based on and using your power, your authority for the good of God and others in the ways of God, well, it's going to be just futility. If you do good with it, at the end of the day, you could send those riches ahead, truly, because those are things that help people in the name of Jesus Christ, and we have some representatives who do that. We got to thank him for that. That's key. Today's lesson from the Qualet, Solomon the preacher, again, also applies to you and I as parents, managers, business owners, in the workplace, and even as ministry and pastors, and as neighbors. We have all been given some level of political influence in this world. So in closing, I want to leave you with one thought, which comes out of Mark 8:36, which says this: what good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul? I think this summarizes today's talk. The ESV puts it this way: for what does it profit a man, and I'd submit a woman, to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul? Let's be comforted today by the true and clear biblical understanding that the abuse of power and political advancement will not go unanswered, and it's going to come into accountability, because at the end, it's just futility. The only thing that we keep and we send ahead are the good things we do with what God gives us, and that includes these leaders. This includes you and I, right? And the political system, the educational system, corporate spheres in society that are being destroyed, and including our youth being destroyed, our culture being destroyed. The abuse of children and the average citizen is coming to a close as people begin to wake up to the ludicrous leadership steering this ship called America and much of the West into the rocks of destruction. Mark 8:36 says that in order to preserve one's life eternally, one must surrender up to God their earthly power and possessions and even political networks. See Matthew 16:24-27 on that. God made clear through Mark that earthly loss more often than not means eternal gain, whereas apparent earthly gain may be translated into eternal loss. Again, Matthew 19:21. As we invest in our government leaders, they invest back in either good or bad and evil ways. All of us, especially our corporate and government leaders, are investing resources all the time. I would assert that they would be wise to grasp the reality and the truth that they still have a chance to make good and come clean. It's never too late. Lee Atwater did that. Google him up and see what he did before he died of brain cancer. Lee Atwater. Google that up. Listen, if our leaders fail to do the right thing, they're going to end up leaving the world just as they came into the world, with nothing. You came from dust, you're going to end up in dust. That's true of you and I as well, I get it, but today we're speaking about our leaders. And in the end, they're going to stand accountable to God and finally grasp the truth that political advancement is futile. And if they fail to use it rightly, according to God, His word and His ways, well, it's on them. I pray this encourages you. I hope it hopefully as well motivates you to perhaps become a better leader in the sphere that God's given you, even if it's not political. I pray this encourages you, motivates you, be strong in your faith, and proclaim the word of God. Do so rightfully and boldly. If you'd like a transcript of today's episode, you could do so by just joining StephenGarofalo.com. That's my community. You need to be a subscriber level for that. We do offer the transcripts and that. But in closing, listen, make sure, again, you subscribe. Bam! Get that subscribe button on there and then hit, you know what I say, Gonzalo Sinistro. I always say left hook. Bam! Right hook, that subscribe button. It's going to fly off there. Maria's going to come out and bring you like spumoni or maybe a good, man, I tell you, maybe something good to eat, like some pasta, meatballs. I can't say that's going to happen, but virtually, if you think about it, just imagine it. It'll taste good anyways. At least in your mind, it is free of calories. But then reach down, hit that little alert bell. There's a little bell in each little city in Italy, in each little town, they have a bell. And those church bells ring. Just hit that little alert bell. You're going to Steve Garofalo. I'll be back on your doorstep before you know it. We are much more than just this channel. We're an organization that works with people all over the country and youth every day and even in corporate America. So God's blessings to you. Listen, stay strong. Thank you for tuning in for another episode. I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo, and this is your Reason for Truth for today.